Audiobook Academy. Book Summary. The Handmaid's Tale. By Margaret Atwood. The Handmaid's Tale, written by Margaret Atwood, was released in 1985. Dystopian fiction with elements of science fiction. The story takes place in a different era. Military rule has taken hold of the United States of America. The Republic of Gilead is the name of the country. First, there is a fictitious terrorist strike that results in the deaths of President Obama and members of Congress. Afterwards, the Constitution is disregarded to make way for law and order. It is time to remove all of the women's rights from society. They have been greatly weakened. Women are not allowed to read, own money, or speak freely. An understanding of the Christian faith from an Old Testament perspective is a requirement. A handmaid tells the narrative. The commander and his wife intend to use her as a surrogate mother in order to have a biological child. Commander tells his handmaid to perform a task that would be fatal to her if discovered. While in a brothel, he offers to buy her illegal goods, and allows her to read. In order to have a kid, his wife forces him have sex with his chauffeur, Nick. The two fall in love and he assists her in fleeing. The narrative ends abruptly, and we are immediately taken to the epilogue. As historical notes, this takes place in 2195. An Arctic university is hosting a lecture by a professor. A historical audio journal found in Bangor, Maine and converted into a manuscript is the subject of his talk. Alfred, the narrator, begins the story by describing the gymnasium where the ladies sleep on military cots. Using electric cattle prods, the matron keeps an eye on the women, ensuring that they can only speak in the shadows. Walking around what was once a football field is how the women get their 2 daily doses of exercise. It is protected by a barbed wire top chain link fence. Angels are armed guardians who patrol outside the perimeter. They all turn their backs on the women. Some of the female inmates wish the guards would turn back so they could persuade them to help them flee the prison. At night, the women swapped their names. That was in the past. Alfred now has a home of her own. My daughter has a private room of her own. A braided rug, a pillow, and curtains adorn the window. In the absence of any artwork, a mirror, or other pieces of glass, the space feels austere. There's no way to build a rope with the materials available, and the shatterproof window doesn't open all the way. Door locks aren't working. Handmaid, Alfred is one. Her face is framed by a pair of white wings that frame her crimson clothing. Marthas are the name given to the domestic servants, who wear green aprons. The wives wore blue dresses. Alfred is lonely because no servants are allowed to talk to the handmaids. Wives are jealous of the handmaids, and she wishes she could tell them how many times they have been harmed or perhaps died. The handmaid is on her way to the supermarket. If they buy something, she'll be able to utilize a money marked with that value. A dozen eggs, some cheese, and a cup of coffee. The commander's wife is nowhere to be seen when Alfred prepares to depart. Like all the other wives, she tends to her garden and knits scarves for the soldiers on the front lines. When she initially came, Alfred can recall exactly how she felt. When the wife advised her to stay out of her sight, she smoked a cigarette. Her husband, in case you forgot, is the commander. The wife is recognized by Alfred. When Alfred was a tiny kid, she was a popular gospel singer on a television show. Serena Joy was her full name. Nick, the chauffeur, is in her way as she passes. His winks worry her, and she wonders if it is AI he is sending her way. These are secret agents tasked with snooping around the neighborhood looking for criminal activity. Alfred is waiting for Ofglen, another handmaid, around the corner. Handmaids have always been paired up when traveling. They avoid talking about band issues in their discourse. Ofglen informs her about the progress of the war. A gang of Baptist rebels were defeated by the army. Praise be, is Alfred's expected reaction. We arrive at a checkpoint guarded by a soldier. Those who serve as guards are known as police officers. Whether they are too young, too elderly, or unfit for any other reason, they are not in the military. It's easier to deal with the elder guards rather than the rambunctious younger ones. This desire to one day have a family and a handmaid of their own drives young guardians. The Republic of Gilead is the name given to the new civilization, and the word handmaid is used to describe it. Women were not as protected prior to the establishment of Gilead. To open their doors, they were apprehensive to do so. Freedom is a concept that the matron who raised her taught her was not limited to one type. There is both a right to and a right not to. All flesh for the butchers and milk and honey for the milk and honey shop are common shop names in the town. The allure of originality is alluringly strong. One of the handmaids appears to Alfred. Offwarren is her current name, but she was previously known as Janine. Offred deduces that the woman is there to flaunt her assets. Luke and Offred's daughter are still fresh in her mind. Previously, her life had been very different. Luke was concerned about their daughter's safety since she kept plastic grocery bags under the sink. A Japanese tourist attempts to take pictures of the handmaids as they depart. "No," says Offred. When the tourists inquire if Offred and her family are content, she responds affirmatively. The travelers' outfits impress the handmaids. Wearing high heels and nail polish, their legs are exposed. Atwood has a way of making the reader feel as though they are actually on the Harvard campus when she depicts the environment. On their way to see a museum, the handmaids see a cathedral that is also used as a museum. Bags are placed over the heads of the dead bodies that are hung on the wall. Before Gilead was created, doctors used to perform abortions, according to the signs hanging from the bodies. Punishments are meted out in retaliation for prior offenses. In light of Luke's lack of medical training, Offred feels relieved. In her dreams, Offred might reminisce about her life prior to Gilead. After the medications they gave her, she has lost most of her memories. In any case, she has vivid memories of both her college roommate and a stroll around the park with her mother where they witnessed a number of book burnings. She remembers waking up in the middle of the night, crying and pleading for her daughter to return. It was the picture of her daughter in a white dress with another woman that stuck in her mind. When it became apparent that Offred was deemed unfit to be a mother, her child was given up for adoption. On the other hand, Offred wishes these recollections were from a tale rather than actual life. She'd jot it down, but that's against the rules. 3 additional bodies are spotted by the handmaids as they pass past the wall. Gender treachery placards were held by a priest and 2 guardians. The guardians of the galaxy were executed because they were homosexuals. A funeral procession passes by the handmaid's window. In other words, these women are the spouses of poor husbands, a term called Ikana wives. A miscarried embryo is housed in a little black jar that one of the women is carrying. Due to its premature birth, it became known as an unbaby. Several of the Ikana wives have scowled at the handmaids, and one has even spit on them in anger. They despise the handmaids. Offglen bids farewell with under his eye in the house's farthest corner. On the other hand, Nick is interested in learning more about her walk, but Offred is aware that they aren't allowed to converse. When she was younger, Serena Joy exploited her celebrity status to demand that women stay at home and not leave the house. Because she got what she wanted, Serena may be upset that she is now restricted to her home. There is no way the commander should be waiting outside Offred's door as she goes to sleep. Offred has flashbacks to her past that night. It is as though she is in a motel room, waiting for Luke to arrive. To get away from his first wife, he snuck out of the house. She recalls the first time she spent the night in the room as well. The message read, "Nola te tavas dartis carborundum," which she found etched into the closet floor. "Do not let the bastards grind you down." A previous handmaid left it. Rita retorted, "Which one?" when she was asked about her. None of them turned out to be successful. During the course of the day, Offred will sing songs to herself in her brain, since music is not permitted. Serena enjoys humming and listening to gospel recordings from her heyday. Offred is eagerly anticipating the arrival of spring, when she will be able to wear a more casual outfit. As a child, the matrons would warn her how frightening the world was for women in the past, and she recalls this. However, the few recollections Offred has left aren't particularly hazardous. She often rests her head on a cushion with the embroidered word faith on it as she reads by her window. She is only allowed to read just one word. Every month, a guardian takes Offred to the doctor. She has prenatal and illness screenings. A covering covers her face, so the doctor is unable to speak to her or see her face. However, this time, he engages her in conversation and offers to assist her. He believes the commander is sterile, as do the majority of guys his age. To get her pregnant, he proposes to have sex with her and get her pregnant. She's taken aback because women are meant to be the ones who are either sterile or fertile, rather than the reverse. Offred expresses gratitude but declines his offer politely. A doctor may submit a bogus report and she'd be branded an unwoman. She's aware of this. There's always Cora Martha waiting outside the restroom for Offred on her bath day. She gets impatient and notices the tattoo Gilead put on all the handmaids while Offred dries off. She returns to her room and cooks herself a meal. Handmaids aren't allowed to drink, smoke, or eat anything with caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, or sweets. The only thing Offred is permitted to save is butter, which she wraps in a napkin and hides in her shoe. With the help of her recollections, Offred is able to break her monotony. She had vivid memories of the debates the matrons held in the dining room. They were supposed to tell about the terrible things that had happened to them in their pasts. It was revealed that one of the women had been the victim of gang rape. It was the matron who posed the question to the girls, and they all pleaded guilty. It was all her fault, the handmaids chanted. When she began to cry, the other girls began to label her a crybaby because of her tears. Everyone in the family gathers for the ceremony following dinner. The commander is notoriously unreliable in terms of his arrival times. Offred is on her knees in front of Serena. In support of her are Rita and Cora, as well as Nick. With his hand, he strokes her foot. He follows her foot wherever she goes. To pass the time before they see the commander, they are glued to the television. Religion has an important role in most of the TV programs. There is a ban on Canadian shows. In an attempt to illegally cross the border with national resources, agents were discovered. There were 5 arrests of Quakers. Thousands of the children of Ham have been relocated to the Dakotas, where they have been given new identities. When Offred and Luke attempted to cross the border with their daughter, she recalled the moment. He reads from the Bible when the commander comes. He recalls Rachel's story, in which she was unable to bear children of her own and turned to Abraham for help. The wife begins to sob quietly at this. This tale would be repeatedly told to the girls by the matronesses. The Bible was then read aloud by a recorded male voice in order to prevent the matrons from committing the sin of reading it. It brings up memories of a time when Offred's friend tried to flee by offering an angel sex. Steel cables were used to beat her to the ground after he reported her. Her hands would have been beaten if she had committed a second infraction. As breeders, the girls were reminded that they could do their jobs without the use of their hands and feet. The commander and his wife are the focus of the rest of the ceremony. In this position, Offred's head is resting on the wife's pelvis. Their hands are clasped together. Offred's underwear is exposed, while the other women are dressed to the nines. Offred is the object of commander's affections. She is then sent out by the wife despite the fact that she has been instructed to lay down for 10 minutes in order to increase her chances of becoming pregnant. Offred uses the butter she stashed in her shoe to moisturize her skin when she's in her room because beauty products are banned. A daffodil is the only thing that can calm Offred down, so she intends to hide it under her bed. After he finds her, Nick kisses her and they swiftly separate for their own protection. In order to meet with her in his office the next day, the commander has instructed him to find her. She hears a siren as she eats her breakfast the next day. It's a birth mobile. It is there to bring Offred to Warren's baby's birth. Throughout the journey, Offred is reminded of the importance of childbirth by the teachings of the matrons. Women who choose not to have children are referred to as lazy sluts because of the decline in the birth rate. Arriving to the residence, a second bus bringing the wives pulls up. Offred believes that the ladies spend their time gossiping about how much they despise the handmaids. Waiting like she's giving birth, Warren's wife waits in the living room. Warren is giving birth in the main bedroom. A group of handmaids chants around the birthing bed. Warren and the wife sit on the birthing stool together just before the actual birth, with the wife seated above. Everyone is overjoyed when the newborn girl is born healthy. She then climbs into bed and holds her kid to show it off to all of her other wives. The handmaids are pushed out of the way. After a few months, Warren will be assigned to another commander to take care of the new baby. Since she has given birth, she is no longer considered a unwoman and will not be transported to the colonies as a result. Offred is required to report to the commander's office that evening as per his instructions. Scrabble with him is all he wants from her, but she thinks he wants sex. In both cases, it's against the rules for her to be alone with him and to engage in a reading game. His final request before she departs is for a kiss, one that he hopes she'll give him with all her heart. As summer approaches, she and the commander continue to meet frequently, but he makes no further advances and they simply play Scrabble. By having Nick wear his hat askew, he tells her that he wants to meet her. Serena is often knitting in the sitting room, so she is unable to accompany her. Because they both get sick at the same time, the wives visit each other. Handmaids and Marthas, on the other hand, can never be sick because the sick and elderly are taken to the colonies, not the wives. In her life, she has never come across an elderly woman. The commander and Offred's relationship grows as they meet more frequently, making the sex increasingly unpleasant. She and Glenn grow closer as well. They stop by a printing shop one day. Prayers are printed for the wives, and the paper is recycled thereafter. Glenn inquires as to Offred's belief that God hears the printer's cries. Even though it is a blasphemous act, Offred refuses. This gives Glenn confidence in Offred and reveals to her the subversive group to which she belongs. Suddenly, A black van pulls up next to them, and she jumps out of her skin. Offred's memories flood back to her that night. She recalls the fall of the United States and the establishment of the Gilead. Gunned-down members of Congress were also killed. There was a declaration of emergency by the military. Islamic extremists were wrongly accused of killing nearly all of the country's elected authorities. The U.S. Constitution was then set aside for the time being. The general people in the United States was stunned and confined to their homes to watch television. Roadblocks were set up to check identities and newspapers were banned. Compu cards, instead of paper money, were introduced that drew directly from bank accounts. Offred's Compu card stopped working one day. As she worked at the library, her manager came in and was compelled to terminate all of the female staff members. They were given 10 minutes to depart, and an armed guard escorted them out of the building. Legally, women were not allowed to own property or work. Closest male relative received their bank account. When Luke tried to reassure Offred, she felt patronized and thought he could enjoy the fact that he now owned her. Observing Nick's Hatterai from the window, she wonders what he gets out of it. She begins to realize that the commander is attempting to make her life more comfortable. She also sees how she may take advantage of his remorse. The first thing she wants from him is information about what's going on in the world. When she attempts to pray that night, she contemplates suicide. According to Alfglen, the subversives use the password Mayday but warn her not to use it too frequently. The punishment for her capture is harsh. Nick's head is crooked as Offred returns to the house. Nevertheless, Serena nabs her to help her with the yarn she needs for her knitting. Suggests that the commander may be infertile, Serena tells them. Seeing as Offred is only reluctantly agreeing, Serena proposes that perhaps they might bring in a new man, naming him Nick. If she has sex with Nick, she promises to show Offred her daughter's image to her. During their trips, the commander has started to drink. "We thought Gilead would be an excellent idea," says he, assuring her that they agree. Only ladies attend the Pravaganza, a wedding for a wife's daughter where Offred learns that the subversives know she meets privately with the commander and want her to obtain information for them. When a Catholic nun converts to the state faith, Pravaganzas may be conducted to commemorate the occasion. Torture is a reality for Catholic nuns. Elders are transported to the colonies, while younger ones can choose between being a handmaid or a colonial servant. The following night, Serena shows her a picture of her kid, whom she shares with her. It seems like she has completely forgotten about her mother's absence. After that, she meets the drunken commander. A skimpy clothing is forced upon her and she is taken out on the town. She hides in the car's floor while Nick drives. The commander instructs her to declare she's an evening rental when they enter a club. The motel where she first met Luke is still there. There are a number of women with similar attire in the area. Despite the fact that the club is illegal, he explains to her that men want a diverse pool of female partners for sexual fulfillment. It's possible that some of the women were prostitutes before Gilead and that some of them had previously worked in the fields of law, sociology, and business. Moira, Offred's college roommate, appears next. She's dressed like a Playboy bunny for the occasion. Offred is given the go-ahead to meet her in the restroom by her. After escaping, Moira recounts her ordeal. A group of Quakers kidnapped her and took her on an underground female train. That's not to say that she wasn't abducted by the guards, who abused her. Films depicting the lives of elderly ladies in the colonies were shown to her. They remove radioactive waste and the remains of the dead. They die in a year or so. One of the movies featured Offred's mother, Moira informs her. They informed her she had no other choice but to become a prostitute at the club. Moira's soul has been shattered. Moira is never seen again by Offred after she leaves. She is shown to her hotel room by the commander. He's disappointed that she doesn't seem more eager to engage in physical intimacy with him. So she plays the part. Serena takes her to Nick's room when she gets home. After they have a sexual encounter, she is left with the impression that she has betrayed her loyalty to Luke. She and Nick are still meeting regularly. Although he is reticent to speak, she divulges all of her secrets to him, including her real name. It is revealed in this conversation that the commander's office has been bugged by Ofglin. The insurrectionists are curious as to what duties he has. Soon after, she tells Nick that she believes she is pregnant, and he believes her. The Gilead women are summoned to the place that was formerly utilized for commencements. They've come to check out a salvaging operation. Execution of females is what this is all about. They've decided to stop publicizing the offenses that resulted in hanging since doing so encourages others to commit the same crimes. A wife, 2 handmaids, and a brother are executed. There are only three possible explanations for the hanging of a wife: death, infidelity, or attempting to flee the household. Every single one of the handmaids must touch the ropes in order to demonstrate their agreement to be salved. Later, another guardian is brought to the front of the line. In the matron's words, the handmaid is accused of having been raped by him, and as a result, she has lost her unborn child. He is beaten to death by the handmaids in a circle. Ofglen is the first to assault, kicking him several times in the head. Ofglen explains to Alfred that he was actually a subversive and they lied about his guilt when she asked why she did it. His suffering was too much for her, and she was determined to put an end to it as fast as possible. The following day, Alfred is greeted by another Ofglen. According to her, the elderly Ofglen committed suicide after spotting a dark vehicle heading toward her. Serena is enraged when she sees Alfred. On the night when the commander took Alfred out, she shows her the outfit that Alfred wore and informs her that she is like the other handmaids. Nick stops whistling when he hears this. She exits and enters her room. In the wee hours of the morning, Alfred waits for the inevitable. Considering various methods of self-destruction, she wonders if Serena will simply murder her instead. The sound of a black van approaching draws her attention. When Nick knocks on her door, she feels betrayed. However, he persuades her to accompany them, explaining that they are members of Mayday and have arrived to save her. A warrant is requested by Serena and a warrant requested by the commander. Serena did not turn herself in, and Alfred knows it. She is accused of violating state secrets, thus they don't require a warrant. As she steps into the van, Serena curses her. The year has now rolled around to 2195. It's the Handmaid's Tale seminar time at an Arctic university. A safe in Bangor, Maine, held some cassette tapes that had been lost for many years. Songs are placed at the beginning of the tapes to mask what would follow. As soon as they were located, Alfred's story was transcribed. Although the identities were changed, they believe that the commander may have been part of the group that began Gilead in the first period. The professor cautions his students against placing too much blame on the leaders. Due to sterility brought on by nuclear mishaps and hazardous waste, the birth rate has decreased precipitously. Women in Gilead were rendered fruitful by having their reproductive organs transplanted into their bodies. They utilized the Bible as a defense. Alfred's identity remained a mystery despite their best efforts. Some tapes were smuggled to save the women's societies in England, despite the fact that most records were destroyed. They're not sure if Alfred made it to safety in either Canada or England. Nick's motives remain a mystery to the professor. Mayday and the ICE were organizations he was a part of. Alfred's ultimate destiny remains a mystery. The professor's presentation is applauded by the crowd. Are there any questions? Is the professor's final word. Characters. Alfred, the narrator of the story. She was a librarian before Gilead, with a husband and a little daughter. Forcibly kidnapped, her daughter is raised by a lady who becomes a handmaid for her. Usually, a handmaid is held only for the purpose of harvesting her uterus. To honor the commander who gave her to him, she bears his name. They are related to Fred, her commander. Despite the fact that she recalls her own name, she chooses not to include it in her narrative. Through recollections and first-hand accounts, she narrates the history of Gilead and the people who lived there. Fear and conformity are her only means of surviving another day in a world where she is constantly scrutinized. However, she also frequently contemplates suicide when her existence as a handmaid becomes unbearably difficult. Alfred's mood is sour. She is constantly abused and slighted by everyone in her life. She doesn't have someone to hang out with at home. Her only other companion is a fellow handmaid, and even they are bound by rules when it comes to personal relationships. When she escaped, Alfred may have been carrying Nick's child. The commander was in the group that designed Gilead. He warms up to her and enjoys their outings together. The commander takes her to an illegal club and spends time with her alone in a hotel room, even though it is against the laws he had a hand in creating. The two of them play Scrabble and talk about their troubles in his office rather frequently. In order to be considered his mistress, she may be exiled or executed. Despite his occasionally pitiful demeanor, he possesses the ability to save or kill anybody who comes into contact with him. Serena Joy, a gospel musician in the days before Gilead who preached anti-feminism, appears in this episode. She advocated for the value of wives who stay at home and allow their husbands rule their life, and she reinforced the idea that women are inferior. However, she is now utterly miserable as a result of her former way of life. In spite of her status as the most powerful woman in Gilead, she feels inferior to her subordinates since she lacks a family. The fact that she needs the handmaids in order to have a kid doesn't make her any less jealous of them. She sends Alfred to the chauffeur for insemination since she is desperate for a child. Nick, a guardian assigned to serve as the commander's chauffeur and gardener. Although it could lead to their deaths, he still has an attraction to Alfred. When Serena Joy arranges a sexual encounter between him and Alfred in the hopes that Alfred would become pregnant, he and Alfred's chemistry is finally satisfied. They keep their relationship a secret because it is against the law. Nick helps Alfred get out of the country. He's either a member of Gilead's secret police, the Eyes, or he's a member of the rebel group Mayday, which is working to overthrow the regime. I don't know which one he belonged to. This is a double agent. No further contact with Alfred is known to exist. The narrator does not reveal what happened to him either. Biography of Margaret Atwood. Margaret Atwood was born on November 18, 1939, in Ottawa, Ontario. She is a writer, poet, and entrepreneur who also happens to be an environmentalist. Science fiction, dystopian fiction, and historical fiction are among genres that Margaret Atwood writes. At the age of 16, she enrolled in Victoria College at the University of Toronto after graduating from high school in Toronto in 1957. As a result of this experience, she chose to pursue a career as an author. When Atwood was in college, she started writing and publishing her work in the school newspaper. With honors in English and a minor in philosophy and French, she graduated in 1961. For her privately published book of poetry, she received the E.J. Pratt Medal in 1961. After receiving a Woodrow Wilson grant, Atwood began graduate study at Harvard's Radcliffe College. She earned her master's degree in 1962. The English metaphysical romance was the subject of Atwood's doctoral work at Harvard, which she never completed. English professor, University of British Columbia 1965, Sir George Williams University 1967–1968 Sir George Williams University 1969–1970 York University 1971–1972 York University 1985–1965–1968 University of Alberta 1969–1970 York University 1971–1972 While at New York University, Atwood was also a Berg Professor of English. Despite the fact that her works raise awareness about feminism, she does not believe that her writing fits into that category because she would have had to make a conscious decision to write in that manner. The Handmaid's Tale author Margaret Atwood has stated that her works are speculative fiction, not science fiction. According to her, while science fiction is full of monsters and spacemen, speculative fiction is based on plausible scenarios that could come to fruition. Margaret Atwood conceived of the long pen in 2004 as a means of distant robotic writing. Using a tablet PC and the internet, a person can write with ink anywhere in the globe. Using this technology, she can conduct book signings from anywhere in the world. A firm called Onachit was created to manufacture and distribute the technology. During 2011, the focus of the firm was changed to companies and legal transactions. The York Theatre in Vancouver staged a chamber opera by Margaret Atwood in 2014. Pauline Johnson, a Canadian playwright and performer, is the subject of the opera, which takes place in 1913. When Margaret Atwood started writing in the 1960s and 1970s, she was extremely anti-American. Atwood stood out against the free trade deal during the debate between Canada and the United States. As an environmental advocate, she served as an honorary co-president of the Rare Bird Club with her husband, Graham Gibson. To stop the installation of artificial turf at the University of Toronto's football stadium, she threatened to cut them from her will. Founded in 2014, the Future Library Project is Katie Patterson's brainchild. For the duration of the project, the goal is to collect an original short tale by a well-known author each year. Dedicated space in Oslo will be set out for the manuscripts. Scribbler Moon, by Margaret Atwood, was the first submission. She jokes that when the book is ultimately read in 100 years, they will need a paleoanthropologist to interpret the story into their language. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button for more content like this. See you in next video.